Hi, my name is Brian. I am back with 3 new miracle stories for you guys. And just make sure if you like this content, just subscribe and hit the like button. And hopefully that'll get the video pushed out to more people and possibly somebody that may be needing a miracle in their life. What if the biggest moments in your life weren't coincidences? What if they were interventions? Because some people go their entire lives without witnessing a miracle. And then there are people like Joe Monarch who have witnessed 3. Joe is 62 years old, grew up in New Jersey, a normal life, normal story, until it wasn't. Because his story doesn't begin with certainty, it begins with doubt. It was November 1975. Joe was 18 years old. He and 2 of his friends are driving through South Jersey, heading into the Pine Barrens. But then a snowstorm hits, hard. The car runs out of gas on a dark, empty road at 11 p.m. No traffic, no help, freezing temperatures. 3 hours pass, nothing. And then, out of nowhere, headlights. A truck pulls up. Driver steps out, calm, unhurried. He offers them 5 gallons of gas, exactly what they need to get home. Joe tries to pay him. The man refuses. Instead, he says something Joe would never forget. If you see someone who needs help, stop and help them. Simple as that. His name? Frank Gilmore. He gives directions to his house so they could repay him. Just a mile down the road, simple, real, ordinary. The next day, Joe goes back to return the gas can to say thank you, but the street doesn't exist. Not just missing, never existed. Police confirm it. No record, no address, no Frank Gilmore. Joe even mails letters. They come back, undeliverable. And that's when it hit Joe. What if that man was not just a man? That moment changed something in Joe. It opened his heart, but unfortunately, it didn't last. Because not long after, he lost someone he loved deeply, his grandfather. And with that loss, his faith began to fade. 4 months later, in the middle of the night, Joe wakes up, not gradually, suddenly, out of a dead sleep, with one overwhelming feeling: get up, go to the living room, and find a book. He doesn't question it, he just moves. I'm not sure I would do the same, but yeah, he just gets up and goes to the living room and finds the first book, and he opens it. But something strange happens. None of his lights will turn on, except for one, the dining room light. So he sits in silence, holding the book he grabbed, in complete darkness. He looks down, it's a Bible. He opens the Bible randomly, no plan, no intention. He just felt the need to open it, and his eyes land on one chapter. It's John chapter 4, a story about a desperate father seeking healing for his son, a story about belief born through a miracle. And in that moment, Joe sees himself, the doubt, the longing, the need to believe again. That night, his faith returns. So after that, life had moved on. Years had passed, even decades. Until 2009, Joe is at work, when something feels wrong. His arm goes numb, his leg feels weak. He decides to go home. But as he walks to the car, he hears it, a voice, clear, familiar. Don't go home, go to the hospital. It's his grandfather, the same voice, the same broken English. Not a memory, not a thought, it was a voice. Joe listens, he goes to the hospital, and the doctors find it. It's an aortic aneurysm, a silent killer. The doctors tell him if he had gone home, he likely wouldn't have survived. But years later, he undergoes surgery. But recovery isn't easy. 2 months later, he couldn't breathe. Even walking had become a struggle. Tests reveal something far worse. It's end-stage kidney failure. Dialysis begins, a transplant is scheduled. Everything hangs in the balance. Then another crisis, a severe blood infection. Doctors tell him if he had waited 12 more hours, he probably wouldn't be here today. But then it happens again, another infection, more antibiotics, and then something no one can explain. His kidneys start working again. Not slowly, not partially, but fully. Tests confirm it. Dialysis stops, the transplant's canceled. Doctors have no answer. But Joe does. To him, it's not coincidence, it's a miracle. Today, Joe lives differently because he never forgot what that stranger told him all those years ago. If you see someone needing help, you stop and help them. So he does. Paying for groceries when someone comes up short, donating clothes, just doing what he can, not for recognition, but because he knows what it feels like to be helped when it matters most. Joe often thinks about the story of Job in the Bible. It was about a man who lost everything and somehow gained even more in the end. Because sometimes life breaks you before it rebuilds you. And sometimes a miracle isn't just about surviving. It's what you choose to do after the miracle. Because maybe the reason some people may experience miracles is that they can become a miracle for someone else. God is a God of miracles. We read about him all the time. The blind see, the dead rise again, but those are Bible stories, ancient. It was the summer of 2012, a normal day, kids laughing, running around, having fun, friends talking, a backyard pool filled with noise and life. You know, the kind of day where nothing feels dangerous and everything feels right. This story is about a woman named jesuschrist. Hopefully I didn't butcher the name. Her youngest daughter needed to use the restroom, so she took her inside. She took off her jacket and she used the restroom, washed her hands. So she sent her back outside while she stayed to clean up. It was just a minute, maybe two, but that was all it took. She walked back outside and everything felt normal until it didn't. Her friend suddenly jumped up and started running, and so she followed her, and then she saw it. Her 11-year-old son carrying the limp body of her almost 3-year-old daughter. Her lips were blue, skin was pale, and she was not breathing. It was in a matter of seconds that her whole world had collapsed. And then her mind went somewhere where no parent's mind wants to go. My life is over. My husband will never forgive me for what just happened. Everybody was scrambling to find a pulse. She still wasn't breathing. Time had slowed down for Dia, and then it sped up all at once. She tried to pray, but nothing would come out except one word, Jesus. Again, just Jesus. That's all she could say. And then something inside broke. So out of desperation, she shouted, "If you don't breathe your life into her, she will be dead. So breathe your life into her, please." And it was at that moment she coughed, just a little. Some water came out of her mouth, and somehow she knew what to do. She grabbed her, threw her over her shoulder, and ran. She didn't know where she was going. She couldn't even think. She just ran until suddenly she realized I had left my shoes. So when she bent down to get her shoes, her shoulder pressed into her, and it felt like water pouring out. Then she heard it, voices behind her shouting, "She has her color back." She stopped, turned around, and there she was, full of color, alive, groggy, but alive. She rushed to the car, ready to go to the hospital, and then she started talking, asking for her Dora necklace. And at this point, she knew she was going to be okay. But that wasn't the only miracle that happened that day, because for years, her son had the same nightmare over and over and over again. One of his siblings drowning, and he couldn't save them. He would wake up crying, telling her how hard he had tried. And then she would tell him something that didn't even make sense at the time. This isn't random. One day, you are going to have the chance to save someone, and you will be ready. That day, he was 11 years old, playing in the pool, when somebody told him, "Turn around." So he did. And there she was, under the raft, not moving. He didn't panic. He acted. He grabbed her. He carried her and saved her. And in that moment, everything clicked. Looking back, God was in every detail. The timing, the prompting, the people, even the nightmares that prepared her son years before it had happened. We don't always get to see it clearly, but most days, life just feels normal. But sometimes God will pull back the curtain to let you see what he's been doing all along. And when he does, you realize something, that God hasn't allowed miracles to stop. They're still happening because God is the same today, yesterday, and forever. All right, this story should not have ended in a miracle. In fact, it almost didn't, because this isn't just a story about survival. It's a story about a moment, a single decision that changed everything. He was only 1 year old. His family was in the middle of moving. Boxes packed, life was in chaos, everything changing all at once. And in the middle of it all, he got sick. It was just an ear infection, something small, something normal, the kind of thing that you don't even think twice about as a parent. So his mom did what any good parent would do. She made a doctor's appointment and wanted to take him to the doctor. She just wanted to expect some answers, expecting some routine, get some medicine, antibiotics maybe. But it was on the drive there that something happened. Something shifted. It didn't come as panic. It came quietly. A feeling, a knowing deep down inside that she really couldn't ignore. There was a voice inside that said something was seriously wrong and that she needed to go straight to the hospital. It didn't even make sense. Nothing looked that serious. It was just a small ear infection, something, she'd probably seen several times before, but she listened to the voice in her heart and she went to the hospital. When she got to the hospital, she spoke to the doctor and said she just had this gut feeling that she needed to bring him straight to the emergency room. She didn't understand why, but it was just this knowing inside of her that something was terribly wrong. And fortunately for her, the doctor listened. So they ran some tests, all of the tests, because he trusted the motherly instincts. So there's just waiting and watching and hoping that there was nothing, that this was just some small, little, insignificant illness. The doctor explained that 95% of his blood cells was leukemia. And he even told her that he may not even make it through the night. How do you process something like that when you go thinking your child just has a minor infection in his ear, and then go from that to your child may not make it the next 12 hours? That's what she was facing. She was explaining that there was shock and fear and grief all at once, and she just couldn't fathom a life without her son. And yet it was in that moment that they made a choice. It wasn't a loud choice. It wasn't a perfect choice, but it was a steady one. They leaned into faith. They leaned into prayer. They leaned into something they couldn't even fully understand, but they refused to let go. And it was at this point that the fight began. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, months into years, 4 years to be exact. 4 years of hospital visits, of chemotherapy, of uncertainty, not knowing what the next day was going to bring. Every single day, they didn't know if he was going to make it to the next. Every small moment became everything. It was another breath, another day, another chance at life. It's one of those situations where survival isn't guaranteed. It was like every single update, they would just see, okay, how long can we go? How long is he going to make it? Can you imagine living like that? Not for a day, not for weeks, not even a month, but it was for years, not knowing whether their son was going to survive. And still, they all held on to faith and prayer. Then something happened, something they fully couldn't understand or fully explain. Doctors warned them, even if he lives, he may not walk normally, he may never speak. The damage could be permanent from the cancer and the chemotherapy. The doctors told him that the odds were still stacked against them. But it was in this moment they still had the faith that everything was going to be fine. Today, he walks, he talks, he runs, not just surviving, but thriving. He's a former college athlete, actually. Strong and healthy, living a life that wasn't even supposed to happen. And now he uses that life to bring light to others, to share the stories of faith, of hope, and redemption. Because when you've lived through something like that, he explains, you don't waste it. But when he looks back, the real miracle isn't that he just survived. It's what his parents chose in the middle of the storm. Because pain like that can break people. It can tear families apart. It can destroy faith, leaving behind nothing. But they didn't let it. They held on to God, to each other, to hope. And because of that, they didn't just survive the storm. They came through it stronger. So when he tells a story, he doesn't just talk about the miracle. He talks about the choice that they all made. Because sometimes the biggest miracle isn't what happens to you. It's how you choose to walk through the storm. And that choice can change everything.